Well, I can't find my colored pencils to finish this drawing, so, Bethany Babbles About History, Episode 3, Salem Witch Trials. Let's go! Pardon me for the, macabre look. I feel like it's only fitting. What with the world ending and all. Anyway, let's talk about Salem Witch Trials and let's see if we can wrap things up. So I'm still going to be using the same source I used in the last episode, Unsolved Mysteries of American History by Paul Aaron. It's a good book. I got it for super cheap at Barnes & Noble. I bet you can find it even cheaper at half-price books if your store carries it. Highly recommend. There's a lot of interesting topics in here, such as, let's go to the table of contents. Kent State killings, Watergate, Malcolm X, was Daniel Boone a traitor? Were Sacco and Vanzetti guilty? Who kidnapped the Lindbergh baby? Things such as that. Great book, and since there's nothing else to do, why not get a new book to read, right? I'm currently reading a lot about plants, and I'm working on my garden. And I'm overly excited because my green beans started to sprout, so I'm super excited to have green beans. But let me get to the point. So, during this complete obnoxiousness, is that a word? I have a minor in English, I should know that, but I don't. There was a man named Governor Sir William Phipps, and if that's not a mouthful, he's the one who made the special court for the Salem Witch Trials so that all these women that weren't actually guilty could be tried. There's my hair. Sorry, I'm allergies everywhere today. And he was totally fine with what was going on until his wife was accused, and then it became an issue. And he then decided to end everything. Now, it's really unfortunate because at that point, there'd been enough damage done. If you've watched BuzzFeed Unsolved, you'll probably recognize the clip where they're standing in a courtyard, and all the seats have names of the people killed due to the Salem Witch Trials, and it's really sobering. If you're easily afraid by ghost hunting stuff, I wouldn't watch it, but it's really interesting because they do go into the history of the Salem Witch Trials as well. It's a really cool show. So you're probably wondering, well, why did this happen? Was there really witchcraft at play, or was it just some strange occurrence? So rationalists of the 18th and 19th century didn't even think they needed to take the time of day to analyze this. They believed that those who confessed to being witches and who named other witches did so only to save themselves from the gallows. So if you were accused and said, yeah, I'm a witch, they didn't kill you because they knew they could get information from you about other witches. So they believed that those people were lying to save their own skin. Is it possible some of them were witches? Maybe, but that's up to your interpretation. In the 20th century, my least favorite, Freudian interpretations came to the fore. I'm personally not a fan of Freud because a lot of his theories have been disproven. I don't think he's a very valid source. I think he was hung up on his own issues that he had from childhood, and he was translating them to the issues that he thought everybody had. And here's a news flash for you, Mr. Freud, if you can hear me from the great beyond. Not everyone's attracted to their parents. There, I said it. Stop. It's weird, dude. Just stop. But they believed the girls were having a case of hysteria, the result of repressed adolescence and pre-adolescent sexuality. And since the Puritans were so much against any expression of sexuality, it's a fairly solid theory that these girls were just acting out. I mildly disagree with that because I've worked with 7th graders. They don't do this. They don't do that. When they get frisky and weird and you're like, are you okay? It's usually for some other reason, usually because they're bored. And there was nothing to do back then, so of course they were bored, and they were part of the pastor's family. They couldn't step a toe out of line, so of course they were bored and probably seeking attention. I'm trying to think of any times that any of my girls, and some of them are watching this, did anything. Oh, there was one. She started dating another boy in the class, and they were adorable. They really were. But she had her moments where I'm like, are you okay? Because she'd be and I'm like, you need to stop. But they're 12. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Girls act weird when they like boys, and boys act weird when they like girls, or when boys like boys and girls like girls. The point is, having a crush on someone is painful, and I'm getting off topic. Alright. So the Freudian interpretations were popular until the 1970s. So this was still being looked into in the 1970s. And obviously it's still being looked into today. We're talking about it. So social historians began to look at the social and economic backgrounds of the witch hunts. This is when it gets interesting. Native American wars had been devastating, so had epidemic illness. Geez, that sounds familiar. And I won't say Indians because those are people from India. I will say Native Americans because they were native to America. That's another thing I'll probably talk about in another video. Now, the king had revoked the charter under which the colony was governed, leaving the entire structure of government unsettled. And anytime that happens in history, like when there was like 4 popes, it's bad. It gets weird. People get stressed. When the government is not in place, as much as we sometimes hate our government, we need some sort of system in place so things don't fall to anarchy. We might be headed that way. Anyway, the agrarian culture was threatened by the influence of more cosmopolitan merchant class. So that was becoming a lot more popular, was merchant and trading as opposed to just farming. Oh, here's a lovely little picture for you. That's from the Salem Witch Trials. Would you look at that? Oh, gee. Golly. Weren't they dressed nice? Weren't they? Oh, look at the girl lying on the floor. She's probably pretending to have a fit. I'm sorry. So since they were so steeped in Puritan theology, it would make sense that they would want to blame Satan for what was going wrong. They would believe if you do something wrong, God is going to punish you for it. So because of all these things going on, they're like, well, everything's going wrong in our lives. It must have something to do with Satan. I'm not discounting that. I'm a Christian myself. I'm not discounting that. I'm just letting you know the theories. This is not meant to offend anyone. Now, the people we've talked about, Tituba was black, Sarah Good was a beggar, and Sarah Osborne had her financial. She's talked about with her son. She lived with her husband before marriage, supposedly. And she hadn't been to church for more than a year. Many of the early accused were just scapegoats. And that tends to happen. When there's a problem, people like to find a scapegoat. Germany, before World War II, after losing World War I, their scapegoat was the Jews. And that's a very heavy topic that we're not going to talk about right now, but if requested, I will discuss it. So the social strains and social divisions led New Englanders to cry witch. They wanted to find an explanation for it. Think about it. We always want to find an explanation for something. At the time, they didn't have scientific research available to them, so they're going to turn to religion. Now, there was actually 2 Salems, Salem Town and Salem Village. The accusers and the supporters lived in the interior, and the accused and their defenders lived near or in the town. The former tended to be poorer and more devout. The latter tended to be richer and more secular. So once again, here's another issue we have. The divide between the rich and the poor. And that can cause a huge issue. We see it today. Money causes such a divide amongst us that it tends to make us hate one another, because the people that don't really work that hard seem to be the ones that get all the money, and those of us that work really hard barely have enough money to survive. So it's definitely a dividing factor in society. Now, the Salem witch hunt also brings about a family feud that, if you know about Romeo and Juliet, makes the Capulets and Montagues, according to this book, seem the closest of friends. That is saying something. So there were the Putnams and the Porters. And I've gotten to my 8-minute mark, so I think I'm going to leave off for there for now. And we will finish this up with episode 4. And then, what do you want to talk about next? Let me know. I'm knowledgeable in Jack the Ripper. I'm knowledgeable in the American Revolution. I'm knowledgeable in a bunch of little things, and I'm more than happy to do research on topics you want to discuss. I'm considering talking about next why I hate Christopher Columbus so much. So if you don't tell me what to talk about, I'm going to go on a rant about stuff. But please put in the comments down below whether you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram. Let me know what you want to see next. And we have one more episode of the Salem Witch Trials, and that will conclude our spooky story. Thank you guys so much. Have fun learning.